Last Friday, Matt Rule met with the media and a brilliant question was asked. I wish I knew who asked it so I could give them credit. But the question was essentially, is there another way other than calling plays from the sideline that Heinrich Haarberg can or will be utilized in the offense this season? Here's what Matt Rule had to say.
I think that remains to be seen. I probably don't want to give too much out to everybody, but I think in fairness to Heinrich, I just have so much respect for him as a competitor. He can go out and do anything. You look at Coach Frost, right? Coach Frost was one of the great quarterbacks in college football history, and then goes on and plays safety in the National Football League. And Heinrich reminds me so much of that. Heinrich to me could be a great safety, probably a great linebacker, be a great tailback, wide out, tight end, and so we have the opportunity to use him, when needed. At the same time, I also don't want to lose my number 2 quarterback because, he ran a dive, so there's a fine line there. But we're not going to play this year out of fear. We're not going to play what if this goes wrong? I know sometimes that's the way people think. That's the way sometimes I think. But we've made a decision this year that we're going to attack. We're going to go all in on this team and attack with everything we have. And Heinrich's a big part of that, so we're going to use him.
Gary, I've been thinking about this constantly since this press conference, because it makes so much sense. I don't know about linebacker, and I feel like perhaps he's a little bit too big to be a running back. Maybe not. But tight end, or even some sort of Tim Tebow reminiscent package. Daniel Kalen is good enough that there's no reason for him not to be the backup quarterback. So for Haarberg, your future is kind of written out for you. You're not going pro as a quarterback. But there's nothing written in stone yet that he can't go pro as a tight end. He's got the height. He's got more than enough speed for the position. Not saying it's likely, but to me, there's just so many reasons to explore this.
I like the Swiss Army knife kind of mentality idea better, to be honest. There's a couple other quarterbacks. I understand and I agree with what Rule's saying. He doesn't want to lose his backup quarterback to a dive play or things like that. But to your point, I think Kalen would give him a good run for his money if you don't have Raiola in the mix, right? He's a generational talent by all accounts and purposes of what we're hearing. I think Raiola has created a gap that kind of creates a luxury that you have a guy that appears to be so good you can't bitch him. And then when you start going backwards from your best quarterback down, I'd be curious. I don't know. But I get a feel that there's not a ton of separation between Haarberg and Kalen. I think there's differences. I think there's strong strengths and weaknesses for each of them. Unfortunately for Nebraska, you got to go back. I think it's Tommy Armstrong that played a whole season without needing a backup, due to injury. So I'm always going to have that in my head, that you don't want to shoot all your bullets too early because you don't know when you're going to need maybe a combination of those two to replace Raiola if he's out for any kind of significant time, especially in a meaningful game where you can have a guy that's more run heavy, maybe deep ball, and then you have Kalen who can more methodically and accurately move the offense. But you and I talked a little bit before it became like a bigger topic, bigger talking point. You go back to last year when Sims was going to be the guy, that first game, they put him in there almost like in a H-back scenario and threw to him out of like a tight end spot. And I think people kind of automatically go into that. Me personally, I would love, I know you said you think he's a little bit bigger, but you remember when all the injuries happened to the running back position last year? And they got to a point where, for whatever reason, they weren't heavy with Ives. So they moved Josh Fleeks from receiver to running back. I would love to see that dude lined up in the backfield, lined up at the H-back, whatever, with Raiola, and then get some option out of that. There's no denying his ability to run the ball, his speed, his toughness. That's the other thing. Anybody can get hurt for sure, but he's durable. He's not a typical quarterback that, if he starts taking a beating or starts taking a pounding running the ball, you start worrying about injury. Again, anybody could get hurt at any time, but he's a tough dude, man. Like, you could run him just to keep the defense on their toes, and then he could still throw the deep ball. If you're running some option or some reads with Raiola and him in the backfield, and the defense starts really packing the box with all that speed you've got on the edges, you could pitch out to him, hand it to him, have him run wide, and once in a blue moon, you might have somebody wide open over the top. And you don't worry about one of the Johnsons or Irvin trying to throw a 40, 50-yard pass to Lloyd if he blows the top off, for example. Harbert can hit that. So, I mean, the things that he can do from an athletic standpoint, I think it's worth kind of rolling that dice a little bit and potentially having him banged up or having to move Kalen from third to second string if he were to go down, just so that you can add multiple wrinkles, in my opinion, to the offense with him in the backfield. You could do things with tight end, stuff like that. But when you look at receiver, tight end, some of the other positions they mentioned, we've got solid, if not stars, at those spots. Pair them with Raiola's passing ability and ability to read defenses and navigate an offense. To answer your question, man, I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to move him from quarterback to utilize his athleticism, don't play it safe and put him at spaces that you already have a lot of talent, mainly tight end and wide receiver. You've got more than enough guys at those two positions, and you can create another layer that is going to be very difficult for defenses to have to account for because he can throw. You know what I mean? He's probably not Raiola throwing, but he can run better than him, and when you start accounting for that and you start getting safeties that are playing up tight because linebackers are really stacking the box, worrying about him running. And don't forget, two of your running backs are coming off of major injuries from last year, and injuries at that position were a problem a year ago. You don't know exactly what you have, so you might need the depth anyways, without the benefits you get of the added wrinkles it creates for the defenses. So I agree with everything Rule's saying, and I don't think they are playing things by ear and waiting to see how the season goes and like, well, let's try him here. I'm of full belief that they have packages. They have an idea already what they're going to do. And to answer your question, yes, I think he'll be utilized in other positions besides quarterback. I just hope that they, like what Rule said today about, they're not easing anything in. They're coming out guns blazing week 1 against UTEP. They're probably hoping they can get through this game without showing too much of their hand before the Colorado game, especially, and then obviously before they get into Big Ten play. My dream scenario is him coming out in different packages, either in that kind of H-back spot where he could be lined up in the backfield, could go in motion and step out as a tight end. I don't know what he can do as far as blocking goes, but I wouldn't worry about that or have that be a reason to keep the ball out of his hands and making the defense account for him. I'd love to see him in the backfield, some read option with Raiola, and then every once in a while you call it a trick play, but he's a quarterback, to have him after he's taken a few carries to stretch it wide and hit somebody on the sidelines or over the top of the defense. I think that would just make it virtually impossible for defenses to be able to just completely lock down everything. When you look at what we have at running back, when you look at what we have at wide receivers, and of course tight end, then that's all being ran by what seems to be a generational talent at quarterback.
As always, tell us what you guys think in the comments. Is there a position you'd like to see Harbert play, or do you just want to keep him at quarterback?